My Gavan and Melanine, and well met indeed. I am Arakir Galadirthan, the head of the modding team behind Divide and Conquer, but also a avid Age of Empires player, he says, with some caveat in a moment. And welcome to what I can do as a little bit of a breakup between the total, which I'm really grateful for, Age of Empires. Obviously, I've done a lot of Age of Empires before, and it's been requested heavily for the video that falls into this slot. And part of the reason that I was concerned I may not be able to do Age of Empires is because the version of Age of Empires at the moment is 5.4.1.8, numbers. And this, all of my saved games are from 5.3. So I'm currently playing version 5.4, and all of my saves are from 5.3. And historically, that would mean that they wouldn't work. But I've tested this, and it does. So here we are. Now, the reason all of my saves are from 5.3 is because I've not actually played Age of Empires now in about a month. Which is why I feel slightly hypocritical in bringing you this video, because it suggests a level of activity on my part which is not true. So I apologise for that. But our Age of Empires community is thriving still, courtesy primarily of the introduction of people like Wrath, who we'll talk about in a moment. And so the Discord group is always welcome to those wishing to play Age of Empires. And whilst the quality level of the group has raised, I mean, even I'm not very good anymore, but I'm still substantially better than I was at the beginning. I think we all reminisce about how useless we used to be. But it's still welcoming to those who wish to play without being shouted at or told off or any of the above. So, Age of Empires, here we go. What I will do is explain everything, and then I'm going to speed it up, because I watched this whole thing already so far, because I wanted to make sure it wouldn't crash at any point. And the total time is 2 hours and 25 minutes. However, it is at times 1.5 speed, so what's that really? About 1 hour and 3/4? Something like that in real life time. So we're trying to get that down, hopefully, to about 45 minutes. So, let's run through the players then. Well, of course, the main perspective of the video will as ever be from my point of view, because I can only tell you what was going through my head. I am one of my favourite nations, the Italians. This is a diplomacy game called, and the map is called Snowy Island. And unlike many other diplomacy games, you start in fixed locations. So depending on your colour, assigns where you start. Now that can easily be edited if we wanted to play this one again with the boat nomad start. But it's diplomacy. So our players, myself, Galu, in my favourite colour as well, grey, because it shows up on the minimap really easily. Tell me you cannot see that black spot on the minimap there. Straight away, I know exactly where I am. Excuse me, sorry. Only just woken up. Right, if we circle round the players then, to my northwest is Alex8349. Little side note, Alex, I changed the numbers in your name to 8439 and noticed that you didn't actually realise, or you've left it that way purposefully. But here, you're clearly called 8349, and on Discord I changed it to 84, and you removed the space, but you didn't change the numbers back. So apparently the numbers don't mean that much to you. But anyway, Alex is playing as the Mayans. He's off to the northwest. He's a very competent player, about the same level as myself, probably a little bit better. Further round, we have the Spanish with Big Fellow, who happens to actually be Spanish. So playing as his own nation is Big Fellow. In the far northwest, a fellow YouTuber, DAC enthusiast, and an all-round nice guy. And he's in the corner, unfortunately. Swinging around once more, we have War, the small snake, who I believe is French, en français. And he's playing as the Goths. Now, he is very, very new to the game. So do watch out for that. But he's playing in blue as the Goths. Key things about the Goths, obviously, massive infantry nation, no walls. Key thing about the Spanish, good with the trade, good with the cannon galleons. A very beginner-friendly faction from what I can tell. The Mayans are an archer nation who also happen to get cheaper walls. So the Mayans can assist the Goths by building walls for them, if they are that way inclined. Now, further round, we have Wrath. Now, Wrath_27 is one of the two players who joined our group who we can firmly say are expert/professional players. They are incredibly good. Indeed, I believe NoPro is actually even in according to Brastas told me just yesterday evening, I believe it's NoPro, is currently in the Swedish team for a tournament that is ongoing right now, a worldwide Age of Empires tournament, and NoPro made the Swedish team, so that gives you an idea of how good they are. Wrath, I believe, is American. NoPro is Swedish. But Wrath is incredibly good, as you will see throughout this whole video, and the joining of him and NoPro to the group substantially raised the quality of those that played quite frequently. So we have Wrath and Nopro to thank for the boost in quality, because people wanted to get good enough to play with them. As you will see in this episode, it's very difficult to balance Wrath. And finally, in the far right-hand side, totally unaware for some time of the game, who has basically half the map to himself, is Melvin. Melvin Weir Cannon. Melvin is playing as the Huns, a cavalry nation, who don't need to build houses, which is a very useful little bonus at all times. So Melvin's away to the east, and the rest of us are clogged up on the west, and Wrath has a little bit of space in the north. Now, it's a diplomacy game, so everyone starts neutral at the beginning, and you assign your alliances as you go along. Alliances can change. They frequently do when I'm playing. And it makes for an entertaining, if not backstabby and rage-quitty kind of game. Now, I'm told that in my absence, diplomacy games have been stopped. People don't play them anymore because they don't like how it normally turns into everyone against the best player, or a group of 3 people will team up and just ruffle stomp around the map. Which I believe I've used that colloquialism quite correctly. Do correct me if I'm wrong with it. Because of the length of this video, and it's quite a while before people attack each other, I'm going to speed through almost all of the initial economy stage, just in an attempt to make the video not outrageously lengthy. Because diplomacy games have a tendency to last. So, I'll comment on a few bits as we go through, but until the first real military engagement, I'll keep it at ×4, if that's okay. People popping up to the feudal age already. As you can see, Wrath is already storming away with the score, although Alex is not far behind at the moment, actually. But Wrath has been in the lead since the game start. Oh, I didn't say Wrath is the Chinese. The Chinese are an interesting nation in that the Chuku Nu, as you will see in this very video, if I can get to the right places in time, is an outrageously powerful unit. Very, 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 very good unit with a lot of all-round bonuses. The Chinese don't get any gunpowder, and this does cause a few issues for them in certain cases. Of course, they get really good scorpions, but the scorpion is so easily countered by mangonels, it's just not fun. A single mangonel onager, siege onager, can take out about 4 or 5 scorpions if they're grouped together, and the scorpions have no hope in hell of hitting the onager, so it's always it always feels a bit unfair. I should also mention, as ever, I am using various graphical mods. You'll see that when my towers are built, and indeed even just with the Italians. This isn't what they look like in the base game. Same with the Chinese. Indeed even the Huns. That's different barracks you'll see there. The graphical mods are all listed on, I believe, in the link to the video, actually. I believe the generic description for every Age of Empires video has a link to all of the... I've made a text file with all of the mods I use in it, so you should be able to have a read of that if you wish. Now, to give you an idea of the current situation and rules, the only rule is that Wrath can't have an ally because he's too good. So no one can ally with Wrath, and there can never be more than 3 allies at a time per sort of grouping. I am currently allied to Alex, 8349, but we do not have team victory turned on, which is why our scores haven't normalised. Melv is not allied to anyone at the moment, neither is Wrath. I'm up into the Castle Age, which means I'm going away to build a second town centre over there, but at this time, Wrath is booming quite substantially. Well, I say booming. In comparison to the rest of us, he is booming quite substantially. It's the Chinese doing what they do well, overpopulating. Speaking of which, the population cap, I believe, is 300 or 400. Don't believe what it said there about 250, that's incorrect. Highlighting how new Wata the game is, he didn't know how to delete a building. So it had to be explained through that. But we're all doing alright. We're all just growing, growing, growing. Melv is growing in a line rather than in a sort of circular shape. He's started here and he's just plunged deeper into the heartland. I'm kind of spreading out slowly. I'm fond of being slow. I enjoy the base building aspect of Age of Empires, which isn't really a thing. As you'll see, Big Fellow has walled himself in, so clearly he and Alex aren't on friendly terms at the moment, as they're both building walls against each other. Wah is the closest to Wrath, but he does not, he may well not know it. If we just turn it down and see what everyone can see for the moment, I have found Alex, Bigfellow, War, and Wrath, but do not yet know that Melvin is over in that corner. And you can see my resources there at the top. Melv, resources are a lot fewer, but he's found everyone else except Bigfellow. He's got quite a good sight range of the island. If we swap to Wrath, probably knows where everyone is. Yes, indeed he does. And his resources. Gold is absolutely steamrolling, right? Jeez. But wood and food, not too much more, but the gold is outrageous. Swapping over then to Alex. He also knows where everyone but Melv is. Everyone's struggling to find Melv. Wrath has made it to the Imperial Age at the 36th minute. He doesn't really know about Bigfellow's base because of the wall. The wall is stopping any sight there. If we change over to War, he doesn't know where anyone is. I mean, obviously he's found Bigfellow and Alex just because they literally are right next to him. And he's found Wrath's, like, 7th town centre. And of course he doesn't know where Melvin, or most of the island is. And finally, Bigfellow, who's in his little prison, basically. He knows that Alex is right next to him, although he knows barely anything about his base, which is interesting. He knows more about War. He's found my castle. He has found Wrath, and he has found Melv, actually. So, smaller overall scouting area, but he has at least found everyone. And he's doing alright with the resources as well. So, we'll swap back to me, and we'll go back to ×4. With the fact that these 5.3 games work on 5.4, I will look to do Age of Empires for a little while to fill up the Saturday slot. Also, as I spoke about in one of the videos recently, I'm really this time actually hoping to do shorter and more frequent lore videos rather than 6 weeks between them and them then being an hour to an hour and a half long. I think I would rather do them sort of every few weeks than with them being 10 to 15 minutes and talk about smaller topics. Because I feel like that's a better way of going about it. Right, as you will note, Wrath has crossed the small bay here, the inlet, and he has set up another town centre and military to the north of Melvin. Melvin has some cavalry archers and scouts and whatnot littered around amongst the trees there. But Wrath is fully moving in. His ships have arrived and he is attacking the Hunnic docks. And in go his forces. The Chukunus teaching the cavalry why they are the superior unit with their outrageous amount of firepower. Now we can keep it at least ×2. Melvin's small army is immediately defeated. I don't think the Chucks lose a single unit. Naval Dominance is immediately had by Wrath, and he brings in a lot of siege rams. Very favouring the siege rams. Melv trying to do some damage there with his what are they called? Not Hussars. Ugh. Tarkans. With his Tarkans. The siege rams make their way through, and an exodus of the Huns takes place. Villagers are fleeing to the inner centre. Melvin has changed diplomatic stance with me to ally and I to he. He is fleeing to the safe haven of the Italian lake. And as you can see, it really is an exodus. He literally sends every villager out. He just abandons his small home here. The siege rams make short work of Melv's base. But Melv gets all of his villagers out, at least. At a time when the Italians, myself, got some barracks, got some castles, got some siege workshops there. I've walled myself in a bit. Got a few town centres up now. Still not enough, really. I'm not doing well enough. Alex is doing quite well. His military is taking shape. He's built some walls as well. So, Wrath beats Melvin out of his starting domain at the 48th minute. Quite easily, it has to be said. Apologies. I'll do what I can to cough off camera. As I really, as ever, CBA to edit out coughs. Who has time for that? It's a Saturday. I want to be free. Although I do enjoy this, otherwise I wouldn't do it. Oh, Melv leaving behind a palisade wall. Always useful. That's going to do loads. That army of siege rams and advanced archers that he's bringing, they're never going to get through that palisade wall, Melv. But Melv escapes to the very bottom side, where he sets up shop. What do the Italians have to assist him? I've got some cannons. And that's about it at the moment. The Italians get cheaper gunpowder units, which is always a bonus, and our unique unit is effective against cavalry. Now, we have done exactly the reason why Brasidas says people don't play diplomacy anymore, and everyone has now allied against Wrath because he is getting out of control. The Chinese then set their sights on the Goths, who of course don't get walls, so are immediately at a disadvantage. And they've broken through in the north, and they're sacking the town centre of War. Of where? Not sure how to pronounce your name. Small snake as you are in Guild Wars. Which is... Some might read that name as a little damning, sir. Perhaps you should call yourself the Big Snake. For an ego boost. The Chinese have broken through there. They're breaking through en masse in the south. Siege equipment coming. But the Mayans have arrived. Plumed archers and eagle warriors all. But the siege... Are they siege? The onagers get some good shots in there. Eagle warriors taking that AoE damage. But it's little comfort to War, whose northern town centre has fallen. Southern castle has fallen. Oh, I should mention back in my base, my army is assembling and sort of moving out. But back to the front. The Mayans push the Chinese back, and with the help of the Chinese's own siege equipment, they manage to take down some trebs. And they bring down all of those onagers. But the plumed archers go up against something they can't really face. The second example of the Chukunu besting a unit of similar type. The Chukunus then become the target of the plumed archers, and despite being outnumbered, they turn on the Mayan. Oh, I didn't realise War. Oh dear. War was allied to me, but not to Alex. So he's actually assisting in the downfall, but although they're only halberdiers. But the plumed archers get massacred and pull away from a smaller number of chucks. The Chinese still romping through War's base though. In the south, there's a little annoying camel there doing some damage to me, which is always a pain. But my army is assembling, just as the Chinese are making a play for me. They will regret this day. Mark this as the day the Chinese fortunes failed. Although War offers very little resistance in the north, unfortunately, with unupgraded skirmishers, only the second tier of archers. He has got halberdiers, but little consolation. The Chinese make their way to me. And the Genoese crossbowmen are not a match for the Chucks, but the 20 or so bombard cannons I have are more than a match for the Chucks. And the siege rams. And anything that the Chinese can send. Bombard cannons have a very useful advantage in that they don't kill themselves very much. They don't have a particularly large area of effect with their attack bolt, unlike an onager. So when an enemy unit gets close, the bombards at the back don't do as much damage to the bombards at the front when they're trying to shoot those units in melee, which is always a bonus. Now, whilst we have outrageous success in the north, and we lose hardly anyone and the Chinese army falls, there's a bloody cliff in the way, and I don't react fast enough, and I lose a lot of my archery ranges in the south. And the Chinese make their way through a small gap there, which Melvillin has not filled. Failing in his section of the alliance, not bringing strength solidarity to it. He sees us decline. I have a little bit of a safe haven here, though, with some docks and a couple of keeps keeping that dock protected. But back to the north, you'll note that the Mayans could not stop the tide of the Chinese. They have now broken through entirely in the northern section of War's base. And they're coming through on the eastern side, and War's troops now are down to virtually nothing. But he tries to pull back, but in vain. Now, Wrath goes on a bit of a raid. Note that this is the first of about 9 times that my base gets raided. Oh, but watching this back, it does make you want to play it, doesn't it? It's such a simple and enjoyable game. I just can't go back to it because Brasidas is too good now, and I'll never want to play with him because he will be able to beat me and without any challenge. Right, we'll speed it up a bit, as we aren't even halfway through yet. But sadly, War has no answer to the Chinese, and it is, spoiler alert, not long before he sails from the island with what villagers he can get. reflecting on his performance. It could have gone better, sir, but as long as you had fun, that's all that matters. Back to my own base, you'll see the camels there romping through the centre. Bringing down my villagers, annoying me. He's got a little fleet there stopping all trade between mine and Alex's shoreline. But Melv and I are trading by sea now to the south, so there's at least that advantage. Wah has resigned. Sorry, I missed the exact moment, but he has resigned. Meaning that Wrath now has the whole northern side of this island. Right from the bay across. And indeed, of course, he has land in Melvolin's old base. But I strike back in the south. Hoping that Big Fellow and Alex can hold his main army, I move in on his secondary base on the northern side of the southern map. Using a lot of geographical terms here. Now, my army composition is actually quite good against the Chinese because, obviously, the Chuku Nus are an archer, so skirmishers are a solid counter. They're a cost-effective counter. The Chinese also don't get very good cavalry, other than they do get camels. But, of course, the Genoese crossbow is a counter to any form of cavalry. So I've got the camel aspect covered and I've got the Chuku Nu aspect covered. Additionally, the Chinese then can only hope to throw onagers or scorpions at me, and both are countered quite substantially by a horde of bombard cannons. Now, the only reason really that this army would now then die is my poor micromanagement. And as many of you will know from my time as a YouTuber in the Total War games, poor micromanagement is practically my middle name. So we'll see what happens to the fate of my army in a moment. Although, no, I'm doing it a disservice. Because Wrath is so heavily focused at the moment on Alex's invasion and attacking both Alex and Big Fellow, he essentially allows me to just take out his base. I don't think he even sends a single counter unit. So, we won't worry about what I'm doing over there then, because he doesn't attack me at all. So, back into the centre then. We drop down a bit. The Mayans and the Chinese are really going at it. The Chinese are bringing a lot of siege equipment. And he builds castles everywhere. This is what I hate about... This is the one thing I really despise about players who know what they're doing. It's the mental aspect of trying to beat them. You know that whatever scrap of land they take from you, they will build buildings on it. So when you take down what you think is their military production, you've taken down the tip of the iceberg. You've basically got to clear the whole map, and it becomes more of a slog than an enjoyable battle. I prefer the battles where two big armies will go head to head, and the decisive victor, if there is a decisive victor, he will then claim your base. But if your armies kind of beat each other out, if it's almost a draw, then it goes to the next decisive battle. Whereas with these people, it's like just a non-stop slog. Can you endure the slog, and then can you counter it? Right, interestingly though, even though these siege rams in the south here could have moved on and taken the castle, they stop after about 4 archery ranges. So some condottieri are going down. Condottieri, what's the plural? The Mayans are doing okay. The Mayans have the advantage, an advantage, in the elite eagle warriors, especially Mayan ones, have high pierce armor and high health, so they are a good counter to Chucks. But Chuku Nus are such a unique unit that it's difficult to really counter them because of they're just so powerful. They really are powerful. But they need to be, because the Chinese do have some major failings. Now, Big Fellow is getting involved with his superior Spanish cannon galleons. But do note that rather than sweep the entire coast and try and maybe house Wrath, destroy everything he can on the edge here, anything that you destroy is an annoyance. He only goes for like key targets and then kind of leaves his fleet standing, as you'll see in a minute. But the fight is very much at the moment with Alex and the Mayans. Now, Alex, most of us were on Discord. In fact, I think all of us were on Discord whilst playing the game, so there isn't very much chat, because we were all just talking. So that is a little bit of an explanation why no one's really saying anything. So the only time anyone says anything is if you just don't want other people to hear. So Big Fellow has total naval dominance because Wrath can't transfer into ships at this time. Now Wrath has lost the bulk of the nation in the south, except for this 4 area here. 4 stables and a castle, which is a massive failing on our part, as you will see. But Melvolin is starting to get back in. Wrath has lost in the south. And in the north, the Mayans are at least holding, with my army now on its way back. See, big fellow here avoids all these houses in this town centre on the edge and pushes in for that town centre. It's all a bit up in the air. It's all a bit up in the air, really. Alex is just throwing his units into a staging ground and just holding. That is all he can hope to do at the moment, is just hold. And he does it rather well. My condottieri, I'm going to assume the I is the plural. They take those small rams down. But now comes the first fun twist, because it's diplomacy. It's a diplomacy game. And the diplomacy games are very dull if you just let it go the way that you think it's going to go. So something has to change. And as ever, it falls to me, noble-spirited that I am, to ensure that change comes in this game. And so in preparation of what I like to call Operation Attack Everyone Blindly Like a Berserker, I begin dropping castles, towers and whatnot around Melvolin's base. He doesn't notice for some time, but my force moves around the southern side of the bay and heads north to attack Wrath in the south. Wrath's claimed this little bit of a lake in the middle here, but I'm training some cannon galleons, some bombard cannons, sorry, to stop that. Now, Alex and Melv combined managed to really get the drop there, as you can see, and we managed to actually get a push on the Chinese in the south. In the south of their north base. The Huns, of course, bringing to this fight the one thing the Mayans cannot use at all, which is cavalry, go working together quite well. The Hunnic cavalry charging in first, taking the brunt of the damage, and the Mayans bringing up the kind of anti-building unit and their archers behind. And Trebs, of course, as well. So, Wrath is now under attack there. And my army is also coming around on that other side. So he's very much in a pincer. So it looks like it's all going well because... although Big Fellow has at least cleared out that southern side. So Wrath now is really in a position where it's kind of all gone a bit tits up. But that's because we've all ganged up on him. But even so, he's still holding on quite nicely. Yeah, he's got the far and away the best score. But the sheer number of dead there. Only the Mayans made it out alive. But a big dent to Wrath's military power and his base. There we are. My bombard cannon's moving in. Let's speed that up again. Bombard cannon is moving in to stop the ships. And my army has arrived here on the southern side, although we're delaying for some reason. Just waiting. You'll note the military is in position. It's more of a sword of Damocles, as it were. It's more of a don't backstab me because I've got buildings in your base kind of action. But there's a couple of ships moving in as well to protect the trade. But our army moves north. We clear away a castle. Now the problem with this map is it's so choke pointy. It's an absolute bugger to run around it. The Melvolin charging in to do some raiding with the superior cavalry archers that the Huns get. And Alex just methodically clearing away that western side. So Wrath is really up against it now. However, Big Fellow, having naval dominance, moves his ships away. And Wrath has already escaped. Before we even properly attack, he's got 3 town centres in Melvolin's old base. So it's not going to be the end for Wrath this day. But we just clear away from that northern side. He's been pushed up to where War's old base used to be. Alex attacking unimpeded on the west. And Melvolin, no one is stopping him raiding at all. Because, of course, Wrath has abandoned this base mentally. Wrath has already fled. He's not even thinking about this base. We step up our operations now then as we feel that Wrath... Because, of course, none of us know that Wrath has made it over here until Melvolin finds him. But we feel at this time that Wrath is kind of on his way out. We've nailed in his coffin quite nicely. He's up against 3 allies. He can't really hold out. So in anticipation, and seeing that he's got quite a few castles of his own, I pop some bombard towers into Melvolin's base. Only again as a precaution, just to make sure he doesn't cheat on me. And some trebuchets being trained there to also just remind Melv that I'm in a superior position. But of course, all of this time, Wrath is growing and growing and growing. The leech, not leech, sorry, the, I don't know what you would say. The hornet's nest is growing in the east, as many of the hornets leave. And there we are. I backstab Melv. Just at the right time, my trebuchets are all in place, and we drop his castle. His villagers get immediately killed. Bombard tower and the castle taking a chunk of his economy down. However, knowing that this is exactly what was happening, Alex immediately sides with Melv and changes me to enemy as well. And my army in the north comes under fire from both Alex and Melv. And I lose all of those bombard cannons in an annoying little gesture. However, my army endures. But I haven't yet changed Alex to enemy, and I do then. And his elite eagle warriors, I thought they'd do an awful lot better there, but I think he tells them to attack the Genoese, so they spend a lot of time running around, and that is what brings them down. My attack on Melv in the south does go quite well, but it also, much like Newton's, I can't remember which law. I'm going to go with first law of physics. If body A exerts force on body B, then body B exerts an equal yet opposite force on body A. And therefore Melv strikes directly back, and I get massively raided. He takes out many of my villagers. I flee to the town centres, but it's no good. Alex starts coming down on the south, and all this time Wrath is being allowed to grow. Big fellow now also changing me to enemy. It's now very much 3 versus 1 versus 1. Until I then break another of the game's rules, and I ally with Wrath. So it's now me and Wrath versus the other 3. And boy, do I do that at the right bloody time. I feel like I play this game properly and everyone else just plays it the boring way. Because at the moment where I realise my backstab of Melvin was a terrible idea, and my army is being destroyed, my base is being destroyed, my villagers are being killed, I'm being beaten, is the word I would use. I then ally with Wrath, who at the exact right moment charges in with his superior... No, not superior, but the camels counter the Huns basically completely. And unlooked for from the east, my saviour arrives. I managed to also hold in that Melvin has a huge army of cavalry, or has a lot of cavalry, but he has no siege. So my castles can hold him back for a long time. And Alex is slow to get there, so... But my base is thoroughly, thoroughly beaten. But so is Melv's. At this exact moment, Melv's base is down to this small gathering he's saved in the north, and the army of cavalry he has here. But Wrath is coming in great numbers. His camels have taken a lot of damage, but they get that castle basically out. And I, of course, do have all the things that took out Melv's base still safe. Wrath's never lost his northern base completely because Alex never finished his push. Some people just don't have it in them, do they? Although my army did survive, I should say. It did survive, and it stays there for a while. Big fellow joins in with his elite conquistadors. We'll see, plural in Spanish. Conquistadores? I don't know. I don't know how your plurals work. But Alex breaks through. My castle's full. My house is full. Oh, the population is 400. But I do manage to escape to this sort of safe haven that I had with the 3 castles, because Alex's siege doesn't get here. And without Alex's siege, these castles don't go down, and many of their armies die. The support of the Chinese also a key factor. And the Chinese coming in real numbers now. Chasing Melvin away. But he gets his villagers out again for the second time. The slimy bastard. The conquistadors come up against the camels, and instead of attacking them, they try and run away. But then they get the high ground, and they do succeed with the support of the plumed archers in the rear. But more Chuku news arrive. And the Chuku news are here to tell everyone why the Chinese are good in this game. Sandwiching them in with heavy camels coming from the north, but the Chuku news just drop those conquistadors. It's just not fair how good they are. Although, as I say, skirmishers are a cost-effective counter, but You've just got to have a lot of them. Even skirmishers don't fare that well against Chukunu. But my base is totally destroyed. Excuse me, sorry. Totally destroyed. Save for a small area in the south, which Big Fellow hasn't arrived at yet with his ships. And of course my sort of double wall, housing wall thing here. I've got an awful lot of food and wood though, but my gold has gotten rock bottom. We can go up a bit faster again. Now, Alex is taking out the rest of my base, and here is another moment where we're about to see why Chukunus are good. Because the Chinese arrive. The elite Eagle Warriors try and take them down. Even the trebuchets are attacking the Chukunu army. The plumed archers manage to get those camels down, but not before they lose every treb. They managed to just drop that treb before, and the Chukunus have now killed all the Eagle Warriors. The plumed archers up against the knights, but then they turn on the Chukunus, and it just becomes a... It's not even... It turns into a firing squad. Look at... The Chucks circle the enemy. It's brutal. Their commander leading the way in the centre there with only 8 health. And the plumed archers just get virtually no kills. And they all die. Look at the arrow fire littering the ground. So I am saved. The climax of all of that is that the Chinese have saved the Italians. But we do not have one thing yet, and that is naval control. Big Fellow still has a big strength. Though, again, Big Fellow is a bit of a newcomer, so that's why he's maybe not as cutthroat and ruthless as you might expect. Because at this very moment, he could move in with his bombards and just wipe my coastal side. But he takes a little bit too long to do that, and it allows me to just use more resources from that area. But my base is now basically the centre area. Wrath's base, of course, over on the side. Big Fellow has been attacking Wrath. But he's got that army in his base he can use. Alex finally seals the deal on the north and pushes in. I begin trade negotiations, or negotiations with the Chinese. And we start sending our trade out. Of course, the Italians get a unique tech that makes all of our trade carts cheaper in the Imperial Age. Which is a useful benefit, I suppose. If your trade goes down, you need to rebuild it. But quite a lot. Normally, you've got quite a substantial trade route going in a normal team game by the Imperial Age, I would have thought. Maybe I'm just rubbish and so I wouldn't have that. Who knows? Very likely the latter. Alex mops up what's left of Wrath's northern base, but he's not bothered about that. Wrath has long since abandoned that, and he's down here in the south now. So a little bit of a lull comes over everyone, so I'll speed up again. I've re-established my... And of course, my base went down, but my resource pile did not. Our underground storage system surviving the onslaught. We managed to get our resources away. But the Spanish have arrived to tell everyone why their coastal defences are a joke when Spanish players are in the game. Wrath sends his ships back as he's being pushed away by the Big Fellow there. He heads south to attack. And he gets quite a few of the Spanish cannon galleons out. But he loses ships, which means that when the cannon galleons arrive, he doesn't have an answer. I managed to re-establish some town centres, get ourselves back on our feet, building skirmishers. Melvillin is also like a plague, regrowing in a separate part of the country. But we have got ourselves established in a few places now. The centre is still a risky place for these guys to come, although Big Fellow really is just demolishing a coast now. Being a bit cautious with those cannon galleons though, but then that's because they die very easily to towers, so. But there is another thing that the Chinese get very well, and that is demolition ships. The Chinese demolition ships have more HP, which means they can get to the enemy better. And Big Fellow has nothing protecting his bombards. And half their number died to just 4 Chinese demolition ships. Wrath still easily the best player. Alex and myself kind of on a par despite my base having been destroyed. My army moves out. Alex's army is away in the north dealing with Wrath, and my army has just arrived on the side. Standard composition of skirmishers, Genoese and bombards. Now, the skirmishers will deal with the plumes, but against the Mayans, we're in a bit of a state here, because if the Mayans just went with Eagle Warriors, they'd counter this whole army. But I get the Genoese back behind the skirmishers. And some Eagle Warriors there, not really knowing whether they're coming or going, are easily picked off. Melverland's raiding our trade in the south, but we're desperately trying to hold on. Big Fellow's taking out our coast. It's not looking good for me. My army is getting defeated by the Mayans. As I say, the Mayans counter me so much better than the Chinese do. And his elite Eagle Warriors just laughing off these archers. Ploughing straight through to my precious bombards in the rear. Trade still being raided. Big Fellow still making his way round. I am in a very weak position. My gold-intensive army is just dropping. And then I used my wily diplomacy to turn the tide once more and backstab Wrath. I side back with Alex, Melverland and Big Fellow and turn back on our Chinese overlords. When you're dying, seek a better alliance. Rule number 1. Worry about being the best player afterwards. So the alliance shifts. I pull my army back. I'm now safe on the north and west, but the east has now come under fire from Wrath. My troops up there, I'm reminded that they're still there, so I'm pulling them down now. Wrath's trade then obviously also goes down because it has to run past my towers. And it doesn't do that quite successfully. Melv pushes in the north to begin raiding. Remember, this time we know exactly where Wrath is now. He hasn't escaped yet. He hasn't escaped. He probably will, but he hasn't escaped yet. Dropping castles to stop the raiding, but my base is once again raided by the camels of the Chinese. But my army arrives. Castles go up to protect my base on the east. Alex and Big Fellow are now safe on that side. And even the Spanish are sending bombard cannons by land now. My army has arrived there, and again we're now facing an enemy that we counter quite nicely. Genoese laugh off camels, unless they're bloody... Well, they do beat the Indian Imperial one, but it still gives them a run for their money. Wrath this time really fears what might come of this because he builds walls. Something you rarely see these people do, these elite people, experts, professionals, call them what you will. But the sight of his walls, and then, wait for it, double layer walls, shows that he really feels the situation may have turned. My castles go up. My army now floats on resources I gathered from the beginning. My base is small, but my force grows. Men from Genoa shipped in, along with superior cannon galleons from, I don't know, where would cannons come from in Italy? Somewhere in Italy. And we block Wrath in. My northern force arrives back from the north, and they just hold that wall, making sure nothing can escape. In the center, we start sending troops to make sure Wrath doesn't get anything out. But the south, we don't need to worry about, because that just leads to our base. So we tighten the noose. But Wrath is not going to take it lying down, and in this staging area, he masses hundreds of Chukunus, willing defenders of the Chinese homeland, supported by their superior rams. They're not superior in any way, they're just siege rams. But it's all they've got. He's bringing camels from the Gobi. I assume there are camels in the Gobi. But the plumed archers of the Mayans have made the trek across the world, and they're here, helping the Italians drop these upstart Chinese. And the fight proper begins. Wrath is lured into his death. His Chukunus arrive, but this time we have the numbers, and the Chukunus are slaughtered. But we have to break through a small gap in the trees, and the plumed archers go in first. Bloodlust, hunger in their eyes for the dead that they have, the numbers, the burial mounds that they have at the hands of the Chinese. They are out for revenge. But the Italians are a bit more methodical. Send in the trash. The skirmishers and Genoese arrive at the right moment to plug the gap, and then the proper army moves up behind, with the bombards coming in from the south using the trees for cover. The Chukunus really getting a number in, but then the northern army arrives, and the staging area turns to an execution plaza. And the Chukunus are outmatched. The siege rams trying to soak up that arrow fire, but there are just so many arrows, it just doesn't matter. But the Chinese counter with their army of cavalry. perfectly matching the Huns in the south, but the Huns are supported by the elite Eagle warriors. A perfect match for the camels of the Chinese. And whilst the Atarkans know that the camels will slaughter them, they pull away, but the Eagle warriors deal the damage. And then the Genoese show up to assist. All the while, bombard cannons firing from behind the tree line, ensuring dominance in this trio, this trifecta, this conglomerate that we have formed to kill the Chinese. Of course, the Spanish currently not present, but they are assisting from behind, taking down many of Wrath's coastal buildings with their cannon galleons. The camels make a last-ditch suicide run for the centre, trying to stop those bombards, but it's just not enough. The Genoese move up in the south and block that gap. More bombard cannons arrive from the Italian homeland, and the fate of the Chinese is sealed. But Wrath is still not out of this fight yet. He's got castles galore. He's got checkpoints to his advantage. The Huns have taken the most blood at the moment. Not taken the most blood, lost the most blood. The Huns have paid dearly in this engagement. With the Italians and the Mayans coming out all right. But more Huns arrive. Not wishing to be the weak link. Sending troops for the honour of the Hunnic Empire. The Genoese now just taking the damage as the bombards deal with the castles. The great fortification at the centre of the Chinese base. 4 great structures. But the armies of the Italians are too great. The Italian alliance, we should call it, because I'm at its head, of course. With the puny Mayans subjugated to our power, and the Huns being paid, the bloodless mercenaries that they are, being paid to assist. That's what the Italians would do, right? We'll suppress the natives, get them to fight for us, and we'll pay off these lesser barbarians to come and assist. They'll die where we won't, and we'll just chuck in some of our superior intelligence. The castles fall as the bombard cannons, of course, have no threats now, and they easily drop those bases. But Wrath, in preparation, seeing his demise of his southern base yet again. Still the highest score by far and away, although I am now second. He builds some docks. He builds some docks to get away. We'll go up to ×2 because the armies are dead now, so it's just a fall of his base. And he begins plans to escape, moving all of his villagers to the north. If we turn on what we can see, there's a big chunk of fog of war we can't see in there. The Chinese throw some stuff at us, but it's no more. Wrath knows when he's defeated in an area. That's another good thing, I suppose, about these pros, is they can at least really objectively look at a situation and be like, yep, I'm not going to waste resources there anymore. It's over. And you've seen that twice here with Wrath. In 2 separate occasions, his bases have gotten to the point where he can't defend them. And so he's just ceased production and focused on his secondary base, which is something that a player such as myself probably wouldn't do. I'd continually throw troops at it just knowing they're dying. So Wrath makes it away again back to his original starting domain. But Eagle Warrior scouts from the Mayans finds him, relays the information back to our main, to the safe haven on the west, where we reside. Castles galore. A little town growing up around this one. But our army does drop what we can here. Look up ×2. Town centres and castles are his target at the moment. If we swap to see what he actually has, he's got a lot of food and wood, but his gold and stone has bottomed out with the building of those last 2 castles. But that's alright. He only needs trash to survive. But Alex already comes with a minor little introductory force, some Trebs and some Huns, as we finish mopping up what was left in the east. The Tarkans, the fastest unit in reaction, make their way north. Oh, Wrath doesn't even have more than spearmen. He gets more than spearmen, but he hasn't yet spent the money or time upgrading to anything more than spearmen. Oh, there we go. They finally jump up to pikemen. Just as the Huns and Big Fellow arriving with light cavalry of all things. The Spanish must really have taken a hit to their military economy. But the Italians, with forethought in mind and a level head, and it has to be said, noble leaders throughout this entire engagement. We begin Operation Not On My Watch, you bloody sneaky bastards, and we start dropping towers everywhere in the south. If we go up to ×2. My villagers move in and using the superior amount of stone that I've got as our armies all pull out of the south. As the force really does come down hard on Wrath's secondary base. But to ensure that he doesn't run away again, our towers go up. As you can see, slowly, methodically covering the land with Italian towers. Just stopping villagers from getting away. Got some villagers up on the north there as well. But Wrath unfortunately just had no troops. We found his base too quickly. And even though he's got pikemen trained galore, he just, if we can see what he can see, nothing. He hasn't even found that central area. That's interesting. The pikemen are just no match. Too many horses. The castles are targeted. Only 2 trebuchets bringing down his whole base. The Italians once again just ensuring that everything goes well. We're securing this hill. Operation Waste Stone and show everyone that we're the real power here. We drop a castle on top of the nearby hill and some bombard towers around it. A camel. One single solitary camel survived the onslaught in the south as the north finally drops. Beaten, haggard, battered, lifeless, the Chinese, as their last bastion of hope really crumbles beneath their feet. Housed as well, Wrath really has few options now, as the combined arms of the Huns and the Spanish drop his last barracks. But our hill defense is coming up nicely. Our towers are still being built, but the camel has survived. Just want to show the castle off because it looks good when it's finished. We are now moments away. The camel really is all that Wrath has left, interestingly. But as the fight has gone on for so long, to and fro, look at that lovely defense. Look how cool that looks. Worthy of the campaign, that design, isn't it? He manages to take down an eagle warrior, and in defiance of everything, screaming to the gods for the unfair situation that he has found his nation in, praying for some form of retribution upon this vile enemy, he goes down. The game ends, and Galu comes out on top, as it should be. No, I jest. But it was bloody good fun, and had I not backstabbed one way then the other way, it would have been over about an hour and a half ago, and Wrath would have just lost. Terribly dull. But as it stood, we managed to totally ruin Melv, who only barely got back into it, courtesy of my backstabbing tactics. I'm surprised that Alex didn't backstab Big Fellow, but none of the others backstabbed because they're all boring buggers. So it was down to myself. And it ends. Let's have a look at the stats, shall we? Wrath and Alex claim the MVP despite my score being the highest, because it goes on military, unfortunately. Overall score then with Wrath at 41,000, myself second at 35, Alex at 33, and Melv at a pitiful 20, Big Fellow 17, and War, of course, defeated early on with only 5. Under the military, Wrath, buildings raised was Alex, then Wrath, then Wrath. Wrath killed 1,480 units, which is the same as Alex and myself combined. He lost 1,600 units, which is the same as Alex, Melv, and myself combined. So he killed an awful lot, but boy, did they pay in blood. Buildings raised was Alex, of course. He had superior trebs. Although I did do a fair amount, but Alex did the bulk. And Big Fellow with his cannon gallons doing a lot more than you realise. Of course, buildings lost was Wrath because he was constantly the enemy. And largest army, 221 with Wrath. Myself only 10 behind on 211. Economically speaking, Wrath. Trade profit, Melvin. And then, of course, a small tribute between Melv and Alex, getting each other back off the ground. Probably when I backstab Melv, Alex chucked some resources at him. Wrath claiming 79,000 food. Nearest to that was Alex, 57. Wood, 118,901. Nearest to that was myself with 89,000. Stone, 20,000. Nearest again was myself with 16,000. Gold at 66. Nearest was Alex at 45. So we are far away at every occasion. Technologically, Wrath. Galu, yes, getting a star on the board. Research count of 70. But Feudal Age, Wrath getting there in 10 minutes. Everyone else averaging between sort of 12 and 13, or 12 and 14, sorry, with me and Big Fellow. Castle at 16 minutes, a full pretty much 10 minutes before everyone except Alex. Imperial at 36, again about 10 minutes before everyone else. Except Alex, who was only 2 minutes behind. Map explored 94%, despite not having that massive central lake. He must have found everything else. And societal, castles of 28. I'm half that with 13. That's outrageous. 196 villagers claiming the top spot. And the timeline showing you the size of people's armies. As you can see, a slow start for the Italians with a strong start for the Chinese, but then the Italians' size grows and grows and grows. I maintained quite a sizable army for a bulk of it until we backstab Melv in the middle there, where Melv's army also immediately dies. Wrath gets a big boost there as he comes back into the game. And Alex staying pretty steady, actually. His army staying pretty much the same size from the beginning to the end. Or his total population. Of course, army is the dark colour and the light colour above is your civilian pop. So Alex's military does grow, as does pretty much everyone's, as it goes on. And it ends. So I do hope you've enjoyed this. I think it probably has been about an hour now that it's all said and done. I thoroughly enjoyed that battle. I love diplomacies, and I've got a lot of 5.3 games saved, so I can indeed fill some gaps with Age of Empires. I just hope they don't update the game again anytime soon. I hope I got the sound levels all right, and I do hope you've enjoyed it. But until we speak again, dear friends, Navar na den perimad melonin, and farewell.